His friends say that they can't believe he's doing this, so I'm so proud.
It's a very cool thing. It really
His
is.
wife.
It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, she said I had to. She who must be obeyed. I've got both.
Good. So, is it okay if we're,
Sure.
do you need him to move in?
Could you, yes, please.
No, we don't want you out of the picture. We want you in the picture. And for those of you who don't know, the taping, the recording that we did last time is now finished and it's been uploaded to YouTube, thanks to Michelle.
Oh, good.
And yeah, it really took a
Just
while.
type in Marika, but it comes up.
Good.
You don't have to follow the link, it's there.
That's very cool. Very cool.
My non-IT husband figured that out.
Hey,
That's great. So what I think it'd be nice if we start a little bit with you, just to talk kind of about a couple of things. Maybe you can talk a little more about what it was like for you to be here after having been gone now a couple of weeks and what that's been like. And then where you are today, kind of what's different and changed and what's happened.
Oh, I got a cat.
Yeah.
Cobster.
Cobster, because he said he would take care of Cobster if I go, so that's been very fun having the pets.
And is it a baby?
Oh, no, it's a 2-year-old,
Oh,
so.
cool. Fun. Fun.
Well, so it seems like a long time since I've been here, but it's family. I mean, you've all been present on my care pages. Thank you so much. You've seen me, I mean, the last time I was here, I was really in the, okay, I'm really dying. And then I heard about the drug trial the very next day, and I was like, man, I'm all over the place. I'm here one day and I'm here the next day, and you've seen that's happened about 5 times since then. And so the latest is I saw my oncologist today, and he said I was in on a drug trial, but he didn't know that I have to have another blood test. So I'm conditionally accepted into a drug trial, but I have to have a blood test tomorrow, and if my marker went up any, which is likely, I'm out.
Oh, is that right? So if your cancer markers go up, you will not be able to?
It's my bilirubin, which is a function of the liver.
Right.
And it's, yes, there's only one. The slot they got for me is only where it is, as of 2 weeks ago. So it's more waiting. And that, for anybody that's want to do the mindfulness, man, just have cancer, because you can just throw any planning out the window. I think I mentioned that before. I'm getting it in spades, and yet I'm still living this parallel life of things aren't lining up. Is it still the question? Is it time for me to go, just to give up, to accept and not fight, or not? I don't know. I'm still fighting at this point anyway. Fighting maybe is not the right word, but it feels like it.
Does the question itself, the fact that you don't know, is that part of what is difficult? Is there, you know what I mean? Kind of like, I just can't decide whether I should keep fighting or not. And does that, what does that do internally, besides the fact that you just don't know where you are yet? They sound like 2 different issues to me.
Well, one issue for sure is, am I doing the right thing? And am I causing myself unnecessary grief? And not accepting what is. I mean, because what is it's not looking good.
Right.
And yet I have these moments. I mean, I hope that I can model for you how, when you share your vulnerability, it's so fulfilling. I mean, in the midst of my pain, I'd rather be with people to share it with than not share it with. So that's still true. Which is why it's a blessing to have something that you can do on email, so if you're not up for anything else, you can check your phone.
Right. Well, and you're speaking to something that certainly has been true in the work that I've done, and that is that very few people that I've worked with over 25 years have said, I'm afraid of dying. They are, however, very afraid of being alone. And having, or the process of dying itself. And so when I hear you say, being vulnerable in a group of people and having some place to share that is really important and meaningful. It creates an amazing intimacy.
It does.
Anytime that I'm willing to get vulnerable, it means that I may well be creating a space for you to get vulnerable. And there's something very meaningful about that. And then something new starts to happen.
Well,
Very
and
cool.
I got an email just this evening from my son's probable mother-in-law. Yeah. And she was just saying how we would have been great parents-in-law to watch our kids grow up. And that's when it occurred to me that you were like my grandparent, because I'm never going to get to be a grandparent. And if I can in any way pass on, you know, my lessons, it just feels good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so your turn.
And if it's okay with you, is it okay if people just ask you
Sure,
questions,
whatever you
Ted?
want to do. I mean,
Okay, is there anything you want to say to start off with? I mean, maybe you
Well-
can just even explain.
I'm Ted. We've been together for 35 years.
Oops.
Most of them pretty good. Not all of them.
I said 33.
Well, we've been married for 33 years, but we got married 18 months to the day after we met. So.
No.
I was a lawyer in real life.
How'd you do it?
Pardon me?
How'd you ask her?
She asked me. Actually, well, it's a little different. We were met at a dating service, and so we dated for a while, and we were up at my parents' cabin for a weekend, and I basically said, "Don't you think we should get married?" It wasn't very romantic, but we sort of started talking about that. And she said, "Yeah." And then about 2 weeks later, she said, "No."
It was the next morning.
Well,
You think they're
short time later. And so another several months passed, and we went to a Chinese restaurant with our friends Jack and Wendy, and the waiter came and delivered the fortune cookies at the end, and I started open mine, and it said, bet on horse number 6 or whatever the thing is. And the waiter came scurrying over it with a new tray of fortune cookies. He said, "Oh, I gave you the wrong ones." And he very carefully chose one and handed it to me. And it said, "Will you marry me, Maury?" I actually still have that fortune, although it's really fragile. It's somewhere in my wallet. I can pull it out. It's between pictures, pressed, So, and then that we went from there. That was maybe April or so, and we got married in August. And anyway, like I said, I was a lawyer most of my life, and worked for the state a lot of that time. I was a law professor and a legal aid attorney, but most of it was with the state, working in environmental law. And my spare time, I worked with Sierra Club for many, many years.
Oh, wow.
So,
But talk about how you've changed from 2 years ago to now.
no, you talk about how it changed.
Yeah.
You're much more qualified to do that than I am.
Well, maybe, Ted, it would be, maybe you could start with what it was like when you first found out that Maury had cancer. Maybe that would be
I
a
was-
place to start.
In a parking lot in Roseville,
Wow.
doing Christmas shopping, and I found a message on my phone, and I called her back, and she told me it was cholangiocarcinoma, which she said, I think it's bad, but she just got the word from the doctor. And by the time I got home, of course, she'd been on the internet for an hour and had all this. She'd read blogs from people, and there was, community pages for. Anyway, it looked like it was really bad at that point. So it was, it was so surreal. It wasn't real. I mean, I told her the other day. I said, I keep going from this isn't real to this is way too real. There's almost nothing in between. I mean, just sort of just the day-to-day acceptance of it. Today, I felt that way. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask what you feel like it is today.
Repeat the question.
Yeah. What do I feel like it is today? Actually, today is kind of in the middle because we got some seemingly pretty good news. I mean, you grasp at straws here. Nobody has said, waved a magic wand and said it's all over. It never really happened. But when the guy said we were in the drug trial, we high-fived each other right there in the room, because you take what you can get. I mean, good news is taken as it's really just the best news you can get, not good news. You never get really good news. It's just better than what you had before. So today, I feel sort of in between. Last night I was lying awake, sort of thinking about this, and I said, I will never get through this. I will be choked up beyond belief, because for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, when I was in your office on, is that Saturday? Friday, last week, whatever it was, I mean, I could barely choke through, she was talking to me and you could barely hear me on that. But somehow after this afternoon, I said, oh, maybe I can get through this, because at least today I don't feel quite so down and quite so sad. It's for the most part, there's nothing sad that happens on any given day. I mean, I've seen gradual deterioration. Her health has just slowly but surely gotten worse, and sometimes little bumps make it better, but mostly just gotten worse. But there's no like one day she will wake up and something really bad's happened. It's thinking about what's going to happen weeks, months from now, whatever. It's thinking about sitting there and watching her die. I mean, that's what gets you. Imagination is, I mean, probably worse than reality, but reality is bad enough, and if imagination is worse than that, you can imagine how bad that is. You've seen it in movies lots of times, they hold the guy's head while he dies, and then he closes his eyes and lies down, but it's, this is different.
It's not like that.
So anyway, I'm obviously, the days I don't have to think about that are better than the days I do. I've told, I guess Mari's sister sent me a note the other day saying how grateful she was and everything.
Due to your facilitation, she sent a really unreal note,
Yeah,
more vulnerable than
well,
she's
she
ever
sent a
been.
real note to Mari. To me, she just sent a little note saying, thank you for taking care of everything. And I wrote back and said, I went to a Kings game tonight, and for half an hour, I didn't even think about Mari. It was great.
Yeah, did you hear that? Just say that again.
Said, for half an hour, I didn't even think about Mari.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it just didn't come up. I mean, in your regular daily life, you probably don't think about your mother for hours at a time. And then
Right.
something I do. But when you're in something like this, I mean, I'm thinking about her 16, 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
And just to have a half-hour break from the thought process was refreshing. And I realized, this is the game Kings won, for God's sake. So
We won?
they won. And so I was kind of caught up in the moment, and I just said, wow, just it's been a half hour since I dwelt on that.
Almost like there's life besides cancer.
Yeah,
It's-
last night
it's
as
a
I was
big
thinking
deal.
about this, I really, there's a difference between the way Mari has approached this thing and the way I have, for obvious reasons, part of it, but she has immersed herself in cancer. I mean, she's in the cancer support community, she reads books about it, she reads blogs about it, she writes a blog about it, as you all know. For me, it's always there. I never forget that she has cancer and she's dying. But I still have other things that are important to me. I mean, I say, my wife is dying, but I still care about homeless people in Sacramento. My wife is dying, but I still care about the legislature trying to screw up CEQA. My wife is dying, but I still care about a bunch of clowns in Washington favoring the fat and sassy over the poor and helpless to an extent that would have embarrassed Louis XIV. I mean, those things still bother me. I still go crazy when the Kings blow a fourth quarter lead. I still won't miss Downton Abbey or The Daily Show. I mean, my wife is dying, but I still do those things.
Thank God.
And I think to myself, if I were in her position, would I adopt that mode or stick with how I approach it? I don't know, but I think I would stick with what I do. I think I would say, I'm dying, but I still care about this. I'm dying, but I still like working the New York Times crossword puzzle, so I'm not going to think about dying while I work over the New York Times crossword puzzle. To me, I have to have something, a parallel universe, as it were, that I can at least operate in some way.
My take on today was the high-fiving, but then being told that I have to have a blood test, and if my marker raises, all bets are off. And I feel like I'm in a loaded, I got this loaded belly, and if it misbehaves tomorrow, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So.
She's exaggerating. She has 1.6, and as long as it doesn't go above 1.8, she's okay.
1.8.
1.8, yeah,
Yeah.
you're
It has-
1.6.
At 1.8, it's history.
I know, you're 1.6 now.
I know, but I've been going
So I'm
up
just
2
saying there's
points every
little
time.
margin. It's not like there's no margin, but not much,
Right, there
Yeah.
isn't much of one,
not much.
yeah.
Anyway, there was a question, I'm sorry.
That's what I was gonna ask, so they have a maximum also besides, because I know in your blog you were saying that you had to have certain conditions to get into this program.
Right, and this is not a limitation of the program itself, it's that this is a national competition for a seat. And the slot that they reserved for me has that condition on it.
So there are other
So
slots,
it
but
might
they're
be
not
possible to get in the next worst group, but it's unlikely.
at least immediate. I mean, it may be available in a month, or, nobody knows, but this
So do you
spot was
get,
available.
yeah, do you get how that works? I mean, it's drug trials, they're looking for certain
Levels.
certain types of people, and, you know, I mean, they're doing drug trials for something specific, and so if you don't meet those, it's not just the fact that you're dying or that your cancer is really out of control, you also have to meet all these other criteria, and that's what Mari's trying to meet.
There are 3 pages of exclusion criteria for this one. Like
Yeah.
being pregnant, for example. I mean, some of them are pretty straightforward, but
Right.
Of course, you could pass.
she could.
So, Maury, is it a double-blind study?
No,
Is there
it's a phase
standard
1
of
study,
care?
so everybody gets it, but it's just
Okay.
that the slot that I've reserved, they've got, I'm making up a number, 5 slots for people with a functioning liver. And then they've got 5 slots for a not-so-functioning liver. I'm in the functioning liver, but going into the not-functioning liver. And so I don't know if there's any, this trial's being given in 3 places in California and 3 places in the East Coast. I don't know if there's any other slots that are open because up till now I've had a functioning liver, so.
And everyone gets the same level of care?
Oh, yeah. The only thing in terms of the group is the dosage that they start you with in the experimental drug. And so they follow so many slots because they're trying to track. A phase 1 trial, its purpose is to determine what the dose of the experimental drug is. So this particular trial has 2 traditional chemo drugs and a 3rd one that's thought to be a booster. And that's what the experimental part is based on, the slot of this group will get so much of this experimental drug.
Everyone in the group will get the same?
In that group.
There's not a standard of
It's
care,
not like a
right?
placebo. and-
No.
There are 2 standard of care drugs, and this is the 3rd, the kicker.
Okay.
And the kicker is the one they're escalating.
And
The other-
everybody gets the kicker.
But a phase 2 trial happens after a phase trial 1 has been successfully completed, and that's where they've established what the correct dosage is. And that's usually based on weight and other things too, not just a flat dosage. And so there, you run into the double blind. And that's not to say that you get no treatment. You get the standard of care, which is traditional chemo.
Right.
But most of the time, people in drug trials are out of treatment options, and so
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
you might as well say you're not getting anything, because it's not effective. So, and then a phase 3 trial is, they know the dosage, and phase 2, they're testing, is it good? And phase 3 is the double blind where they're saying, is it good enough to go to market?
One of the things she didn't see, one of the things in phase 1 is they're trying to test for toxicity. How much can they give you before it has ill effects? And so they escalate it in steps. And the beauty of this one is, it's been going a while, so they may already be at, we don't know, step 3 or 4, we don't know.
Okay.
The one in San Francisco that she talked about, it'll be step 1, because it's just beginning next week.
Because this trial is here in Sacramento, right?
And it's
And
been
it's been
going
going on for a while.
It's the National Cancer Institute.
They raise the dosage at certain increments, and so if you enter a phase 1 trial in the beginning, you're not getting a therapeutic dose of the trial drug. That's the
Probably.
advantage of joining a
Nobody
trial
knows,
later
but
on in
probably.
phase 1.
I think it's interesting though that, because they don't know the level of toxicity for this kicker,
Right.
that instead of being afraid, you're actually excited because you want to try.
Yeah, well, you better buy options.
That's interesting.
Right.
Exactly. It's really interesting though. Instead of, you're not even thinking about, well, what if they give me too much?
Yeah, it can't be worse than what it is now, right?
That's not a problem.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've really been pushing to get a treatment, and maybe looking back on it, I haven't been aggressive enough. Because I've been looking for a trial since November, and my
There
body
you go.
can't wait, and I knew that, and I just felt like I was being pushed to wait. It's around the corner, wait, it's around the corner. I should have had a traditional chemo, but hindsight.
And then we tried the original chemo and it didn't work.
No, not the original chemo, we
No,
tried a brand
the-
new chemo.
What you just had was one of the 3 traditional,
Right,
and it didn't work.
but I did have another chemo that
Yeah.
might have worked.
No, that's true.
So, quick, Terrance.
So this question is for Ted.
Yeah.
He's the golfer.
Oh.
I'm not as good as you, but,
I'm not sure what she told you.
Scratch.
Not quite well. I mean, the one thing, I mean, I told Julie about this on last week, is that I know, I've thought about this so much that I know I need to get away and be by myself for a while. I'm not sure why I know that, but I do. I've spent a lot of my, I mean, I'm kind of a loner sort of person anyway. I mean, I have friends, but I like to do things alone. I go to baseball games alone, and I go to movies alone. I've gone backpacking alone, things like, I just feel like I need to be away. So many people come up to me and say, let us know if there's anything we can do for you. So many people, you know, want to bring food. They want to do something because doing something makes them feel better. And I don't know if I want to, I know I'll have to deal with that for a while because of, you know, just the logistics of dying involve 2 or 3 weeks worth of clearing things up. Bank accounts, credit cards, memorial services, whatever. But after that, I think I just want to get in the car, pack my golf clubs in the back, and go.
Would you ever date again?
Would I what?
Would you ever date again?
I assume.
I hope so.
I mean, I don't think I know anything of, I mean, I don't have a plan. Like, I'm going to be celibate the rest of my life in memory of Mari, or I'm going to head for the brothels of Reno as soon as I can. I mean, either one. Whatever, what happens, happens. And I'm not going to decide now how to respond to what happens, but don't have any specific plans for how to make it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So before we go into another question, Marty, you said, I hope so. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, and we've talked about this before. The best way he can memorialize me is to live a full life. I mean, that's what I want to pass on.
Because that was my next question to you.
And it's just, and for me, that's been about trying to embrace that which I don't really like so much, like, you know, having my body suffer so much. By the way, though, I did get on a different painkiller, and I slept until noon today, so I definitely have been in too much pain because that was really something. So, yeah, so, and I think our son will play a big part too, because he's a little of each of us in helping him navigate.
So you're going to make like a ecological model for your husband and son?
I will never find another Mari. There's just no way. I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think from my experience, having lost my husband when he was only 36, and from having lost another fiance, you don't know. You may think you're going to, but
Say
you may.
I. Can we speak from I?
I mean, I don't know. I don't, you know.
You didn't.
I didn't know, and it's like, I think, you know, it's the future. We can never know our futures. We just don't know how we're going to be feeling at that time. You know, so there's nobody going to say, well, yes, I'll date again. No, I won't date again. You just have to wait till you get there because you may not. You know I haven't so far found the right person to replace them. You know.
For me, it's not
In my
so much
life,
that he
but-
finds somebody else, but that I've seen him open up and be a much softer person in the last couple of years. And that's what I hope he hangs on to, because if he hangs on to that, then he will embrace meeting people with a more open heart. And that's my hope, male or female.
I had a question. You said you like to go to the movies by yourself and things like that. And I do similar things as well, like going backpacking by myself. And I find it to be like a meditative kind of thing. Do you get the same type of feeling, like, you know, you can just get a really clear-headed?
The question is, do I find doing things alone is sort of a meditative process, clearing my head? Going to the movies, no. Backpacking, yes. I mean, it depends. I go to the movies by myself just because I usually go with about 10 minutes notice, and I just go. But
And I don't like violence,
and
so.
I have to be careful with movies I take her to. So, but yeah, I mean, just the idea of sitting on the rim of the Grand Canyon by myself and sort of contemplating the void. Yeah, that's a meditative process for me, for sure. Yeah. You should. Yeah.
I actually wanted to go back to what she said she hopes.
No, I can't go back. Never go back.
Can you speak up just a little bit, please?
Yeah, I wanted to ask her, how did you come to the conclusion of it's okay if he moves on with somebody else after you pass? Because I asked my girlfriend, and she said she'd be scared of mom because she doesn't like, oh no, come back all of a sudden because I'm pretty jealous, I guess. So I don't know. That actually pleased me, but it's okay.
It wasn't a process for me. I mean, I didn't, it's almost a given. Of course I'd want him to be as full a human being, you know, as he can be. It didn't enter my mind.
She spent all this time training me. I mean,
Well, and I do think, I think that it is a really valid question, and I've heard lots of other people say that. Not everybody feels like Mari does. And a lot of people like might say, yep, I want my spouse, I want my husband, my wife, my partner, whoever, to go on and be in relationship again. And then the next time I talk to them, they might say, I changed my mind. You know, I'm not feeling that way today. It really, you know, it makes me really sad, and I actually feel jealous when I think of the fact that I'm dying and she's going to go on. You know, I think it's easy to ask a straightforward question like that, and yet the answer I don't think is that straightforward. It's like everything else, you know. I make a decision, and I'm pretty clear that that's what I want, and then by 2 days later, it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe I want to back up on that. And that, I think the process kind of goes like this. I go forward, and then I come back, and you know, it's like, and eventually I think we come to terms with ourselves, and I think that's the biggest piece in this question that you're asking, is when I am whole here, and because Mari's doing her process and we're hearing about it, and she's consciously walking her dying, that's all part of her creating the self that she gets to take with her, however that piece works. And when she's whole and complete, then we don't, if I feel whole and complete, then I don't want anything less for anybody else. But some of that comes with time, some of it comes with age, some of it comes with experience, some of it comes with spending time on the rim of the Grand Canyon. I mean, it really is. I think it's a process. I think it takes time to come to that, and not everybody does.
I can relate, though. Just a work story is in my 40s. I was a hot shot, and I liked being the hot shot, and I didn't mentor people. I wanted to hang on and be the expert, and then I realized, well, wait, I'm stuck here, and all these new people are getting this experience because I'm too pig-headed to share my knowledge. And so over time, I realized that my biggest joy is to mentor people. Well, you know, I was missing out, but I was too insecure to do that, and that's when I went into consulting and realized I had a lot more to offer than I thought I did before, and that it's really satisfying to mentor somebody. I mean, my last boss that I had on my contract was somebody whom I'd mentored 6 years before. So I think age, for me, had part of it, is that the more that I could fill myself up, the more I would want that for everybody else.
Yes.
It was a natural evolution.
That makes sense.
I have these friends of mine that had a real good relationship. You know, I'm thinking about both of you. Mari, I love you. I just met your husband, Ted, you know, and you know, I don't know how to say this, but because Ted's going to do what Ted's going to do.
Sure.
But Ted's, I mean, we called him Grandpa because he was a good friend, like my grandfather and his wife. And they had been married like 70 years or so. But she told him, and she told her kids, I'm not saying or insinuating anything, but she loved him and the kids, and she told him, and she told my wife, I don't want you grieving more than 3 days. In other words, no, I'm not saying this, I'm just saying the scenario. No, because Ted's going to do what he's going to do. But what she was doing she was communicating with her family
Blessing him.
and allowing them to go on, and I think that's beautiful
That's a
for
good
me.
idea. That's a
See,
good idea.
so if I've talked to my son, I've talked to my wife, and I want the best for them. And I think when she told him that 3 days, because they might feel obligated, they might not. We don't know. We can't plan for it. I watched my brother die. He had Lou Gehrig's. He was 53. And you can't plan for it because when it happened, boom, it hit me. You just don't plan. You can't. I don't care.
But you weren't over in 3 days.
No. He didn't tell me. He didn't have that kind of a relationship. But that's just, I threw out there, that I think if it was happening to me, I'd feel obligated to let my son know, or my wife, honey, this is me, not you or
Yeah.
him, because tomorrow's promised to nobody.
Right.
Ted can go first.
Right.
So, I don't mean to sound negative there, but tomorrow's promised to nobody. And I just think, the communication is so important. And then when Virginia died, they grieved. But at least that conscience is not there where, I wonder what Maury would have wanted me to do or
Well,
something.
I think you bring up a good point, and I think that some of this can actually be said more directly. It's also possible, when we live in a culture that talks about dying, that it's possible to say to whoever, whether it's Ted or your sons or your friends or anybody, I just want you to know it's okay to move on when you're ready. And it may take time. Please feel how you feel. Don't hold it back, share it, and when you're ready to move on, it's okay to do that.
That's better, yeah.
And that's a little more direct. Gee.
As for Ted.
Don't feel offended.
Not trying to leave you out. Ted, you've been together 35 years, you said. In your mind, most of that time, it's kind of two parts, did you think that, maybe it's typically a male thing, that you would go first? I never thought that your wife would go before?
Never thought about it. One thing, my family lives forever. My father's 88, and he's got at least 15 or 20 more years, and his mother died when she was 102. So, no.
Longevity.
I just assumed they'll live forever, and I
Together.
assumed that Maury would be around most of that time. But I never really thought about it. It's not something, I guess occasionally you would say, well, what would happen if one of us went first or the other one? When we were, for example, both retiring, I've worked for the state a lot longer than she had, and so my retirement's a lot bigger. And there are ways you can stack it so that you can get, if one of you dies, the other one gets the same amount or slightly less or a lot less. And we stacked hers so that if she died first, I would get substantially less of hers. It's a smaller number, but it's substantially less of it. And if I died first, she'd get essentially the same amount that I did, because the assumption was, we don't know who's going to go first, but it would be a bigger blow to her to lose all of mine than it would be for me to lose half of hers.
So financially, you planned.
So we made that decision.
And I still have a term life insurance
Yeah,
too.
and we each have life insurance policies for, not enough to cover maybe most of the mortgage, that's about it.
But you really hadn't thought about that you would go first, and I get that. So the second part of the question is moot at this point.
Okay.
Maury, did you ever have a sense?
Well, we bought into California's long-term health care insurance. And I did have resistance because his mother's demented. And I've seen his father go through unbelievable struggle. And I said, that could be in his genes too. His father's side lives forever, but his mother's side, and I just said, we gotta have it. Because that's just, if you can get it, it's expensive and it's
This is
risen
the one
and
you've been
risen.
reading about in the paper recently, where PERS raised the premium to 85% on people's big.
It's basically nursing home assisted living care experience, and so that was in my mind, that maybe he lives longer, but if he's demented, that's gonna be a huge financial hit. So, I had a battle with that one. We didn't wanna do it.
I've been doing it for almost 20 years.
Actually, the question had no, I was looking for no financial in
Yeah.
in the answer. I was actually looking for if you had thought the process, it's how I feel, and I believe that I'm gonna go first. If that changed on me and suddenly my wife was going first, it'd
You know,
be a
I figured
shock.
we were gonna live about the
There's
same
some
amount.
restructuring. but-
Women live longer than men, but I have a slightly better gene pool than she does. So I
His
figured we
lawyer
probably
mind
about.
was running.
Lawyer!
You'd already done that.
There you
I
go.
like that. Anybody else? Jean? I mean, Elaine.
Okay.
Sorry.
You two had mentioned that you met while through a dating service. So with that, Maureen, my question for you is, have you played with the idea of in your mind of matching them up?
Well, it's really funny because he's chided me throughout the relationship that he still has 3 months left on his
Yeah, I
membership.
signed up for a 3-month membership and she was my first date. So they still owe me over 2.5 months of time. It's in San Diego though, so,
You'll be free to travel.
yeah.
Yeah, Sharon.
This is a compound question. It's more of a compound question.
Yeah.
So, if you was to wake up one morning, would you be in more of a state of shock or a state of relief to see Mary go?
I didn't hear the question, so you.
Well, if I woke up one morning and found that Murray died during the night, would I be more of a state of shock or a state of grief?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would.
Relief.
Relief. Oh, I thought you said grief. No, relief. Oh, no. Relief, no. I mean, if Mari gets to the point where she really is suffering on a daily basis and kind of comatose and so forth, then relief will be the case. But now, I mean, you know, we still have fun together. Not as much as we used to, but we still have fun together. We were supposed to be in Fairbanks today, by the way, to see
Northern Lights.
the Northern Lights. This is the best week of the year for the Northern Lights because there's no moon and the weather's 25 degrees warmer than it was a month ago.
And we remember she mentioned she wanted to see that.
Yeah, that's on her list. Yeah.
So now that you've kind of gone through this whole experience with Maria, have you thought about your own time of dying, or has it brought it up in your life more?
Yeah, but I've been so preoccupied with her situation that I can't really say I've sort of, I mean, and the answer, I guess, is you always think about it a little bit, and I've thought about it a little more, but not like as much more as you might expect. I mean, I figure like I have to live through this. You know, she needs me, and I can't let anything happen to me for the next umpteen months or whatever the case may be. And so I really, no. Yeah.
And
Follow up.
are you afraid of getting cancer?
I guess everybody, I've had 2 biopsies for prostate, and both of them came up negative. I've got no history of cancer in my family, so I guess I'm about as afraid of getting cancer as I am of getting hit by getting killed in an auto accident. You never really should take it for granted, but by golly, you don't get killed on the way to and from school every day, so maybe you'll survive to the next time too. That's sort of the level at which my fear is.
I just want to back up for just a second. I want to make sure everybody heard what you said. I even kind of want you to hear what you said.
Okay.
That, you know, yes, I think about my own dying, and I can't let anything happen to me right now because Mari needs me. And I just want that not to fall in the room without really being heard, because that is such a significant expression of love and caring, and that's the place. That's some of what opens up in us when we walk these things together, you know. And I just didn't want it to go unheard, because do you hear it? It's like, wow, I will forego anything that I have to. I mean, whatever. My wife, Mari, comes before anything else, and we don't on a daily basis get to hear expressions like that very much. And so I just want us to hear it. So thank you.
Do you guys still fight?
A little bit,
Okay.
not much.
I mean, fun fight, you know.
No,
I mean,
actually, truthfully, when I talked last time about, we had a fight that got triggered on New Year's Eve. And I did it differently, and I kept on pursuing. I would usually give up, because we're kind of in our old style. And I've always felt like in the past I had to say things in a perfectly right way, in a lawyer-like summed it up, which I'm not anywhere close to having a lawyer mind, so it could be heard. And I finally got to the point saying, Ted, you do it, but I just can't do it anymore. And he has not done it. We have not fought like that. And that was a 35-year tradition.
Wow.
wonderful.
And so he has changed so much.
Hi Ted, hi Maury. So this is a question for both of you, or one of you can answer. Maury, last time you were here, you had mentioned, you just said it right now, you've become a lot closer in your
Yes.
relationship through this whole journey. Is there a happy moment or memory either of you would like to share over that 2 years?
Well, I mean, going way back, the birth of our children was, the most incredible moments, that's for sure.
Although she did tell me to do some anatomically impossible things. I said breathe, and she told me some other stuff. Good memories.
No, I have to say that the way that everybody, like I said, the men in my family, in my immediate family, have all been pretty private people, and they've all come forward in a unique way for each of them. So I treasure that.
Mm-hmm.
And like what you just heard Ted say, we would just take for granted that love and support, and we don't anymore. And so I think that when you know your time is up, you don't want to waste it doing stuff that doesn't take you to a happy place. You don't have time for it.
I have a question for both of you. My question is, do either of you feel cheated? When you got married and you had this picture of how your life was going to go, and I'm pretty sure you had it all mapped out at one point.
Yeah.
Way, most of us do. Do you feel cheated ever that this is the course that your lives have taken? Do you get angry?
Yeah.
At
But it's not going back when we married, because at that point, I don't think you ever see more. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you have about a 5-year event horizon, and that's about it. But when we got close to retirement, when we both realized that, but I decided to retire first, and Maury was going to work for a few more months, maybe another year or so. And at that point, I had in my mind, my parents live in a retirement home, and people who retire there have 3 life stages. You should remember this, because it'll hit you. There's go-go, slow-go, and no-go. The first few years, they're go-go. They go everywhere in the world, they see all this. Then they're slow-go. That means they go to see the kids at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And no-go means everybody comes to them. So we were just entering our go-go years. Turkey and Greece was the first thing we did after I retired. And we had river rafting, we had the Galapagos, we had the Norwegian fjords, Antarctica, a list for about 5 years worth of trips and things like that to do. And I feel cheated.
For me, the cheating was not being able to be a big grandparent.
Yeah.
And so that note that I got from probably, my son's mother-in-law was so touching, because she said she didn't have a good experience with her mother-in-law, and she would have so loved to, raise our kids together, and it would have been a perfect relationship. And it would have been. I adored her from the moment I met her, and so it's not so much a source of anger as much as disappointment that I don't get to experience that. That's why you kids are here.
Have you ever considered, how, I think we had talked about this last time you were here, videos like where you speak to the video and you're like giving a message to somebody that you have not met yet. Have you thought about it at all, making a video for your grandchildren who you have
Well, that's what I feel the
met?
Care Pages is, you know, I mean, I want to leave the Care Pages open. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but one of my golfing buddies said she's gonna hire a medium. So if I'm trying to communicate the other side, which I probably will be, she'll get the message.
Yeah, Houdini tried that too.
So, but on the other hand, how could I say that I regret when I've had so many heart-opening experiences, though I just don't think I would have had without the cancer. I'm sure we would have had fun in our bucket list, but that's not the same thing as really appreciating a moment. And friends in your life, that's why I said that would be what I would miss the most, friends and family.
So Mary's.
I can't see them. All right.
Okay. So, Mary, when you survive this, what will change?
If I survive this, is that the question? If I survive this, what would change?
When you survive?
I actually talked about this at one of my Care Pages a while ago because, like I said, I felt like this whole cancer process has been coming out of hiding for me, and that the Care Pages has been a vehicle to do that. But I really think that if I survive the cancer, I don't agree with Ted when he says that I just do cancer, because, I mean, yoga is very much part of my life, and that has nothing to do with cancer. I wouldn't feel the need to do anything other than to be happy. You know, I just really think if we're happy and we love each other, that that's enough. That's what we're supposed to do, is love each other. And you can only love each other if you're in your own joy and you're whole yourself. So I'd be having a blast. I'd be on the river rafting, and I'd be golfing, and I'd be checking out the northern lights, and I would hope to have the same level of intimacy in my relationships. But I do know a couple people through support groups when I was in LA, and they said that when the cancer came back for them, that they realized that they almost missed it in a way, because there's a when you're facing death, there's a vulnerability that you lose, and you get sucked into. I guess I've heard also said that any cancer survivor never feels like they're really a survivor, that every time they get a scan, they're still scared. But you lose that preciousness of the moment. So I would hope to hold on to that.
And that's a conscious choice and effort, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does take a conscious commitment to, I think what you're really talking about is cancer or not. Will I make a commitment to be present and feel how I feel no matter what? And will I keep creating enough time and space in my life to keep allowing my heart to stay open? Because that takes attention and intention. It takes wanting that.
Right.
And lots of us don't even know what we're missing until we
Exactly.
get to a place like that.
Yeah, and then you get in a busy place and you forget about it and
Yeah.
realize how important it is.
It's very easy.
Somebody wrote a book about deathbed last words, and he said, as far as he could determine in the history of the human race, no one on his deathbed or her deathbed had ever said, I wish I'd spent more time in the office.
Right. No one, anybody that I've ever worked with has never said, I wish I had worked more. Never. I mean, lots of people have said, I wish I'd spent more time with my family. I wish I'd travel. I wish I had a connection with my grandchildren, whatever it is. No one has ever said, I didn't accomplish, and that it's, and we're so accomplishment oriented in our culture. It's, what are you going to be? And we start asking kids when they're in kindergarten what they're going to be. We start looking at colleges for children when they're in kindergarten now. I mean, unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
You know, people only choose schools by whoever, produces the most
something.
Yeah, whatever. And it's like, so often I want to say, wait a minute. Do you know your children enough to know what actually might serve them rather than what's going to make them look better than anything else? So it's a big deal.
One thing,
So why don't
yeah, I
you
was
do
just
that?
gonna say, you know, well, last time somebody was asking me about, I can't remember, it came up, but I said that Ted was not willing to talk about my memorial service. And here it is. So I just, it's the rough draft, so I just kind of pass it around. And it was Julie's help that brought us there. I'll tell you that for sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, in fact, maybe we'll take a break and then we'll ask you, do you want to talk about the family gathering meeting thing a little bit?
Sure, sure. And one more thing, I brought this. I just was at UC Davis today, which is why we can't go to Alaska because I got to get another CT scan and stuff this week. But this is free. Anybody who wants to take it. This is the kind of thing they give you in chemo and talks about. So if you know anybody that's facing chemo, this is a very good free handbook that you can order from the internet. But all the hospitals have it too, and it's really good for somebody new to chemo and what to expect and how to deal with it. So,
Yeah, the other side more? Can you come
sure.
this way?
Okay, so why don't we take a short break? Why don't you come back at 9? Thank you. Mary's memorial service.
Right before break, so it's just.
Oh, it's just going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Break it into that.
And
Anybody have any questions about that for Mari or for Ted?
I have something similar to that, Maury, because I won't tell your husband what you said, but anyway.
I watched the.
Oh, you did?
Well, a lot. I
Okay.
didn't watch all of it. I watched a lot.
But see, you're from the hippie era, remember?
yeah.
And so,
I forget.
but I think to my understanding, as far as religion, it's even called spirituality, just from person to person.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to ask Ted, but you told me that in college that you had something, but you thought differently about. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that how do you feel in terms of spirituality in your situation, and same with Ted?
Well, like I said, I became an agnostic in college, and then I had kind of an experience of grace where I felt like I felt God in my life. Just happened. And I've studied lots of religions, and I really like to dabble. I like what's common in religions. And I get very nervous about anybody that's dogmatic about their religion is the only way. It doesn't matter what the religion is. So I really get my spiritual support from friends and from yoga and stuff like that. And then in terms of, Ted's agnostic, so we haven't really talked about, I used to think that you had to be married to a spiritual guy to be in the whole new age stuff, and realized that that wasn't important. And we had Julie come to our house with my 3 SIBs, and that was quite a challenge for all of us. And I was able to see that, I said that, Ted and I he was a very private person, but still I was able to see the contrast between the lack of intimacy that I wanted with my SIBs was there with Ted, even though on a quantitative meter of conversation, maybe they were the same, but I physically felt way different towards him. It was an eye-opener for me. And Julie kind of helped me see that, because you kind of want to clean it up with your family and try to get as close to the I love yous and we just never got there. They just weren't able to be present, and so she helped me kind of accept that, and in that process, I let him come in more. So it's not a spiritual.
To make
It's
sure,
not religious.
Make sure this is what happened. Her brothers, 2 brothers and sister, and 1 brother's wife came to visit us for 3 or 4 days. And the conversation never left the normal business about who's the best general in the Civil War, or they talk about, I think, interesting things, but not relevant to what Mari's going through. And so Mari called Julie, I guess after you'd been there for a couple of days, you called her and asked her to come over and said, can you please help? And we got them all in the room together, and Julie came in and she, did the best she could to get them to talk. And frankly, I think they tried.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They just aren't good at it, and they're certainly not good enough. But I think they all did their best to try to be open. Yeah, you got to take what you can get sometimes.
But I guess for me also, it was the, like I said, I'm not comfortable in an organized religion, but I've ever since that experience in my early 20s, experienced myself as spiritual and having a belief that community, however I experience it, in whatever context that is, feeds me. And I love inspirational speeches and stuff like that, which I find on TED Talk.
No relation.
But yeah, so I think that that our relationship has grown spiritually, not religiously.
I appreciate that. I appreciate
Well,
that.
and I heard you say that since my sibs were here, something happened and I feel closer to Ted and feel more appreciative of him and
Yes.
who he is in my life, and I open
Right.
up more
Right.
to allow him closer, you know? And then I heard you say, well, that's not spiritual, and I would beg to differ. I think that it is directly through our humanity that we experience our spirituality and connectedness. And so anytime that I feel more connected or have become more vulnerable, that is absolutely, in my estimation, part of the wholeness of life, which to me gets translated into spiritual and human. It's that idea that you all haven't been around when I've done meditations or anything, but the thing that I think is so important to remember is that it's right here in the human heart that heaven and earth meet, or Father Sky and Mother Earth, or however you want to think of that. That, this is the place where I get to experience that thing that's bigger than me as a result of being a human being. And I think so often what we're trying to do is fix our human beingness, which I think we don't have to. I think if we embrace it more, which is what I'm hearing you talk about, then we get to feel connection. But if I have my attention always on being more spiritual and being more and being better and bigger, I never actually get here enough to experience my connection with the people that I love.
Right.
And so that's what I'm hearing you talk about. It's like I'm here and I stayed in the room with my siblings as much as I could. I'm working on letting go of the fact that I can't have exactly what I want with them. And at the same time, that experience opened up this experience.
Correct.
That's being a human being. That's being in the present moment, and we can use whatever word we want for that. I would use that is both spiritual and human. It's the experience of something that is not tangible physically, but is absolutely tangible in my experience.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Ben, have you ever worked or been in a group? I'm sorry, I know I'm talking about. Have you ever worked or been in a group talking about issues to husbands about what you're going through?
No. Have I ever done sort of group therapy for what I'm going through? No, I haven't. Amari really sort of, I wouldn't say she pushed me, but she sort of made it clear that, she thought that this was available down in Los Angeles at the cancer support community there, and other husbands were doing it, or other spouses were doing it, and it might be a good idea, but it just never felt right for me. I don't know why, but I've never really, the fact that somebody else is going through it, all well and good. Julie's, one of my best friend from childhood, who I keep in touch with quite regularly, lives up in Tacoma, Washington, and he lost his wife to liver cancer, ironically, about 20 years ago. And he and I talked about it a little bit, but not a lot. But Julie pointed out he may be the one person in this world I really want to talk to. I haven't done that. He's been on vacation. But anyway, I probably will. I've certainly touched base with him, but he went through a similar thing. His wife had surgery, and then she hung on for, I guess, about 3 or 4 years after she was really diagnosed. It was a little different situation than Mari's, but not unlike it. So a group, I don't know. I really think if I feel like I need some, Mari and I saw a marriage counselor for several months, a few years ago. I think I'm very comfortable with him. If I felt like I needed something, I'd probably just go see again. But I don't think a group is what I want.
if he isn't able to get in contact with you, do you think you'll get your therapy through being alone or through some type of activity?
Well, I know I need to be alone, and activities are just what I do, so I don't know. But I don't know anything organized that has an appeal for me.
Ted, do you feel like you need time now, like some time away now, even when you
I'm
have
getting it. I mean, Maria's been incredible about pushing me out the door. It's like, you know, she I think guilt is a big factor in Maria's life.
Unfortunately.
And I think she would feel terribly guilty if she thought I was just sticking around the house just because she might need me to do something in the next 3 or 4 hours. So I always check in with her and make sure that she's feeling, you know, well enough, or that she has people coming over or something. And then, you know, I feel like I've got my permission slip to spend 4 or 5 hours away. I have not gone away for an overnight, although when she was done in LA, and she was having in the drug trial, and then after that, when she was having the treatment, I would steal away whenever I could and come back to Sacramento, because frankly I hated living down there. That's where I come from, but I hate living down there. And so I would, in the average month, I probably would spend 10 or 12 days in Sacramento. But I would always sort of, I had to be clear in my mind that she was perfectly okay without me when I left, and then I did. But since we've been back up here for the last year, I haven't taken over. I haven't been gone tonight, have I? I don't think so.
But life is about to change, because with the narcotics that I'm on, I can't drive. So I hate being dependent, so I'm not looking forward to that. I've got lots of friends that, you know, can drive me places, but still.
And they'll all come to you.
Yeah.
I had 2 questions. My first one was, since I just seen the memorial service, is that I know Mari told us last time that you weren't comfortable with talking about it, but since you guys have done the printout of it, how do you feel about it now?
It's not true that I wasn't comfortable talking about it. We didn't talk about it, but it wasn't that she tried and I was uncomfortable. We just simply hadn't.
You said you weren't comfortable talking about it.
Talking about the service?
You said you just weren't ready to talk about that yet.
Maybe at one point, but I mean, I've been thinking about the details of it for quite a while too, and I thought, misunderstanding.
And this, yeah, I mean, this is perfect. You know, it's like, this is the kind of thing that gets not communicated or talked about, because somebody just, you know, it's like, okay, it's not happening. I'm not saying you guys were thinking this, but gee, I'm thinking about it, but she's not bringing it up, so she must not be thinking about it, and so I better not bring it up, because because that's, you know, then it's gonna upset her, and on the other side, the same thing is going on, you know, so
I think that's
that whole, it's so easy, and it's because we have made these agreements in our culture that we're not gonna talk about this stuff. So everybody's afraid they're gonna upset somebody. Go ahead.
I have one more question. Since you guys are trying the new drug trial, or hopefully you do get into it, is there anything that you guys want to make sure that you do?
Well, one thing that's nice about this drug trial versus the UCSF drug trial is it's every 3 weeks. So I take a pill for 7 days, but the actual port infusion is only once every 3 weeks. So if it's anything like my others, I'll have 2 weeks of relatively feeling okay. And we've always been pretty good about stealing chances, like going to the Galapagos in December, for stealing away. And it was our fantasy too, being retired, to take advantage of all those travel zoo deals that come up at the last minute. I mean, we're in a perfect place, because you can't make a plan, because it's probably gonna, you know, get busted anyway. So, that would be my hope, that we.
Where do you want to go first?
Well, I'd love to go to Alaska if the lights are still on, but that would be the first place. Second place would be, I'd like warm, you know, Hawaii or something, even though I've been there a lot of times.
Yeah, that's where I'd be at.
And I'd like to have it with my kids, you know.
If you could have the Northern Lights in Hawaii, that would be the perfect.
Wouldn't that be right? Yeah, love the Northern Lights, but don't like Alaska so much. Anybody else have anything?
I just want to put out, I wasn't the hippie, I was a protester in the 60s. You can Google that.
Is that right?
The 60s.
Oh, the 60s.
It was a different time and place.
But it's
Yeah.
funny, because before we met each other, I was a VISTA volunteer out in the field, and he was a VISTA volunteer being a legal aid attorney.
Oh, wow.
So, but we didn't know each other then.
Completely unrelated, but,
Very cool.
yeah.
So since you were here last, how are your sons doing?
Well, one's coming next weekend, and the other one's coming 2 weekends after that. I like them to do it separately. I still want to have a time for all of us to be together, but I want to have some one-on-one time.
Can you speak more about that?
They're just different kids, and I want to separately, say like what you were suggesting about let your dad be who he is wherever that takes him. I want them to feel hear that from me. And there's something that's lost in a three-way conversation that's present in a two-way conversation.
Yes.
So I think I want both. But, the main thing I want to do with my younger son, who's coming first, is really do the handover. Because like my accounts and stuff, my younger son's going to remember it, the passwords and all the different sites and stuff. I want to.
She keeps thinking I'm not going to be there.
Well, I've given you the thing
No, I
twice.
definitely want Christopher's help, but
Yeah,
sure.
I just want to have a backup plan, so I want to get those, just checking account, made to a joint account, stuff like that. So some of it is work, but a lot of it's just intimacy.
Yeah, how can
They're different kids, and I relate to them in a different way. And my one son's had such an easy silver spoon. He just came out of the box with no problems. And his whole life has been easy. And my other son's had such a struggle. So they have such different lives. I want to be there for each of them in their life, how they are.
Can you give us your perception of their acceptance level?
I think that my younger son has been able to be present and accepting much easier just because that's the way he is. He rolls with the punches and accepts things and expects good things to happen, and they do. And my older son, even though he's 30, is just, I think, beginning to separate from me emotionally, partly because he's delayed emotionally and partly because he's losing me and he's trying to protect himself. So I think he's having a much tougher time. And so I want him by myself. And with Ted too, I'm not going to be around when he gets it together. So I kind of want to forgive him in advance. Then he won't always be this angry. It's part of your development that I see it, and I'm sorry I can't be there when you get over it.
So you feel like he's angry with you? And
Not angry, but, well, he's angry with about a childhood issue. He thinks I should forgive myself, and that if I forgave myself, then he would be
feel
healed.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's misguided.
yeah.
Somebody said a minute ago when you're like, it's gonna be a lot of work, did you ever feel like dying would be so much work? I mean, there's so much that when you know that you have to take care of, did you ever imagine the work you would have to go through to prepare everybody?
Well, I was a hospice volunteer, so I had an idea of the pragmatics of it, but not the emotional work.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just think, oh my God, how many, Ted said the other day he felt like a ping pong ball. It's like, my God, how much strength do we have left in that little ping pong ball? Because it's going up and down and up and down.
Yeah.
That's the part that I didn't see coming.
It is the hardest part. It's what everybody talks about. It's really hard. It's up and down and back and forth all the time.
It's a lot easier to get hit by a bus. I'm not sure which is harder on the people who stay behind. They're both hard for very different reasons. But for the person who's going, man,
Yeah.
it might be just a blessing.
But we wouldn't have had the chance for all the growth
Exactly.
together.
But on the other hand, and nor would I have, felt all the anticipation of pain that I'm feeling too. So, I mean, there's all that.
Two-sided?
It comes out, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else? Have anything? Yeah.
I just want to comment on how I've noticed throughout the conversation how it seems like this whole situation is two-sided as your, you know, how that comment, but it seems like, you know what may be coming. You're looking at, you know, what is possibly the inevitable, but you're still in the parallel
Yes.
side of
Yes.
hope and, you know, hoping that there will be this
Miracle.
miracle happen. And I think that you're just incredibly brave because you could just tell how exhausting it must be to try to keep up with those two parallel, you know,
Yeah.
universes.
Right.
She has surprised me. I mean, Mari is a much stronger person than I am in many, many ways. And I'm just so proud of her.
Mm-hmm.
And grateful too that she could have given up back in December of 2010 when the Mayo Clinic said that week than she does now.
Now it's briefly.
Yeah.
And here she is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm amazed and I'm grateful.
Davina?
I just want to say thank you for coming to
Me
share
too.
both of your experience, or sides of the experience. Because I know it seemed like, to me, it took a lot coming last time with you being in pain and all the suffering that you're going through, but also for Ted to open up and come share this experience with us too.
A
Because
lawyer?
that's- How I feel about it is like, I can relate to how Ted may be more reserved of it because I watched my dad go through it with losing my grandpa, and he was the one to stay in his own space and not share his feelings and not open up. And when my grandfather passed away, he was forced to go at the podium and speak, and it broke him down in front of a lot of people. And it's still something that he deals with today, that it was embarrassing for him to have to open up in that way.
Uh-huh.
So I just want to say thank you for coming and sharing your side of it with us, because I think that does take a lot.
You notice I'm not listed as a speaker in the memorial service. I know I couldn't do it. When my grandfather died, my father, who's a minister and theologian, had spoken before tens of thousands of people on television and so forth, had written out his comments, and he made me read them over twice before the service started. And about halfway through, I've never seen my dad choke up like that before. He couldn't go on, and he motioned me, and I had to go up there and finish the thing, which was hard enough for me. Anyway, so I know what it can do to you.
So in observing the obvious emotional roller coaster for both of you, that you brought and shared with us, I read what a therapeutic value that had for you.
Absolutely.
I'm
You
wondering
should have
if-
seen her for 3 days afterwards.
I'm wondering.
Running around.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if after going home, and you process this, if you'll find a therapeutic value for you.
If I knew the answer to that.
It's not gonna happen. Exactly, you're gonna go home, you're gonna process,
Mhm.
and then I wonder if.
Maybe she'll report on it on her.
Because you said,
You want to know?
you had said that you
Okay,
are not,
point taken.
you had said that you are not considering group counseling or therapy or
Yeah.
anything like that. So I'm wondering if after he goes home and processes this, if he'll have a similar therapeutic value as it did to you.
Well,
Yeah, we're your
This
group, we're your
is
group therapy.
This is,
a therapy session.
we appreciate it for you.
We do. You don't know how much you give to us here too. I mean, just seeing,
It's a synchronistic moment, and you just have to capitalize on it.
Well, it is the power of showing up. It's the power of saying yes. You know, I mean, we talked about it earlier, that, you know, I think that when we agree to just be vulnerable and be present, then things can happen. And we don't know what the outcome is gonna be, but, you know, I was sharing earlier with these guys that the longer that I live and the longer that I do my own work, the less concerned I am with being happy and the more concerned I am with being real. And that, you know, that's what starts to happen in these kinds of settings, is if it's real and it opens my heart, then that's what matters to me. So,
and I just wanted to say too that it gives us a firsthand experience that people can deal with these things with dignity and grace and still love other people, and teach us that it's not all a process to be afraid of, and that dying is
Right.
not always totally unhappy, because a lot of happiness and a lot of joy
Right.
comes out of it. And
Right.
it's just,
And see, I didn't see that as a hospice volunteer either. I didn't see that aspect of it.
right.
Even though I was close, really close with a couple of my families, I just didn't see it.
I know, this is really good. It's been great for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have too. Davina?
I think, what you gave back to me with your experiences, that in the last year and a half, we've had a lot of close experiences, near-death experiences with my mom. She's going through a lot. And I think with your story, it made me realize to appreciate those little moments with her. So now, I mean, me and my mom have always been best friends. We've always been close. But now I spend that extra time with her, and I build those memories between her and my daughter, and make sure that they have those moments. And I'm catching more on video now than I never did before. So I think more your story gave to me is just to appreciate the little moments that before
Right.
you sort of passed over and you didn't
Exactly.
appreciate so much, and stop stressing on things that you more or less can't change.
Right.
I just want to say
Let's see.
I wanted to add on to kind of what she said about you don't take for granted as much as you did before. Like, I'm not a phone person that gets on the phone, but when my mom or my dad or someone that I'm close to call me, like, I don't really think about it anymore because you've done your bad.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of makes you think twice about when's the last time you're
Great. Yeah.
And how long you guys are married? 33, but know each other for?
It'll be 34 in August. I'm expecting her to make it to our anniversary.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
well, as part of the class, we can still tell that you guys are madly in love. And, you know, that's a good thing. So, can we see you guys hug or something?
All right. The hippie days. All right.
It's funny,
Peace, love, and rock
we
and
still hold hands when we walk along the street.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
Yeah.
What are you gonna miss most?
I have no idea. I mean, I suspect it's gonna be little stuff, not big stuff. I don't know.
Question for Ted. Just giving, is there anything you'd like to say as far as giving us advice if you ever went through a similar situation, if being a supporting spouse?
I mean, I think all you can do is try to be there. I mean, most of what I do for Mari is heat up these buckwheat bags that make her stomach feel good. That's
Guess
pretty
what
much
she
what I do.
wants.
I make soup for her. I come in there and I ask her if she's hungry, and she says yes. I say, what do you want? And I have to stand there for 5 minutes while she try to think of a list of what we have. You know, it's little stuff. It's just there's no grand gesture you make in a situation like this. You just do what needs to be done and then look for what needs to be done next.
I think it's a process of self-discovery though, because we show our love differently. What's that book about the 5 different ways to show love or something like that? It took a lot to understand that he was loving me even though I wasn't getting it the way I wanted it. And so I think we both expanded our view of how to be loving. We both have. And that it's, for me, the advice would be, and of course, I'm not the caregiver, so I don't know, but it's discovering for yourself what you fit into, and it's like there's no recipe book. You just have to figure it out for yourself, and to realize that, you know, friends will, like, you know, I was trying to get him to go to the support group. That's just not his style. That you have to wade through those weeds and figure out just like the patient has to do, what works for you and what doesn't work. And I mean, you know, your question about the diet last time, I still struggle with that because, you know, been some more research indicating the diet that I was on, you know, was good, but I was starving to death, literally. And you just have to say, it's just not for me. I just can't do that. So, and out of that, say no shows up what you can do and what you're comfortable
I
doing.
think the worst thing you can do is second guess yourself. You say, you know, one of my great heroes, Satchel Paige, said, "Don't look back, something may be gaining on you." So just keep going. You've done every decision you've made up until now is a decision you've made, and there's no going back on it. And if you didn't do something, you never will have done anything different because it's already happened.
Well, and one of the other things that Ted talked about a little while ago, and I think is a really important thing to remember if you're ever a caregiver, is taking space.
Yes.
Getting your own time. Because I can tell you, in 25 years of doing this work, you know, I have seen lots of caregivers die before the person that they're caring for. I have seen, in fact, there's a study out, I can't remember exactly what the statistics are, but people who are caregivers for people with dementia, 60% of their caregivers die before they do.
Wow.
The stress or?
Yeah.
That's gotta be stressful.
Because there is nothing more stressful than caregiving. I mean, I cannot think of a thing that's harder. There just isn't anything. And most caregivers, because of all the guilt they run around with, won't take time for themselves. And they really, really, really need to.
And it's understood with cancer, you know, respite care for the caregiver, but in dementia, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, you just do it until you can't stand, and then you put them in a home. But you gotta, you know, go somewhere in between.
I played 130 rounds of golf last year, so you know, I do get away.
I am glad to hear that. Makes me feel good to hear that. Anybody else, Davina?
So, we heard about Mari's side of her spending time with your guys' sons and everything. How do you think that you'll be there for them after she passes away?
I have thought about that, but I really don't know. I mean, our son in Portland needs her more than he needs me. I mean, he and I, you know, we obviously aren't, things could have been better between us, I guess, but the issues that he has, I think, are with her, not with me. He said that,
Yeah.
You've said that. I mean, I'll continue to relate to him pretty much the way I always have, which is trying to be practical and you know, making sure he has what he needs and supporting him financially if he needs that, and maybe going up there and visiting him from time to time. But I don't see my taking her, I can't fill her role in his life. There's nothing I can do about that. Our younger son, you know, Morris, he's pretty much bulletproof. I don't think there's much I'm going to need to do for him except to continue to be kind of his buddy. I mean, he and I go to ball games together and stuff like that, and we relate that way, and that's just fine.
Will you talk to your sons if Maury goes? Will you?
I certainly will talk to them, but I don't know what I'm going to say.
No, I understand that. There's been individuals in our families that have passed, you know, and I bring it up. You know, I don't know if that's part of psychology or.
It would be ridiculous to pretend nothing's happened. I mean, you can't do that. You know, we had a dog who we had to put down, and our older son was a junior in high school at the time, I think, and he was very close to that dog. And the day that we decided we needed to take Ralph to the vet to have him put down, we agreed we'd do that after Maury and I got home from work, and Jonathan stayed home from school that day to spend the whole day just holding his dog. And I mean, it was an intense emotional experience for him and for us. And when we got back to the house afterwards, he just gave me a big hug, and we didn't say a word, but we shared the moment. Yeah, we shared the moment. So I'm sure this will be not just like that, but there'll be some element of that in there, some understanding without necessarily having any words to describe it.
Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to, Ted, is that idea that a broken heart knows a broken heart. You know, when we are broken open, that place recognizes it in someone else. And unless we've had that experience, we don't really recognize it very well in others. We don't necessarily have to say a lot because there is recognition. Judy.
Mari, we've been, part of our assignment here was reading this beautiful book by Tiffany called No Death, No Fear. And he used a metaphor of a cloud, you know, not always existing as a cloud, but sometimes just returning to the water, but it doesn't really leave. And his phrase was sort of when the conditions are right for us to manifest as whoever we are, I'm Judy or Mari,
Yeah.
that's Ted, we manifest. And then when the conditions are no longer right for us to exist, then we unmanifest.
Right.
And that made me think, you know, when you talked about your drug trial, you know, if your drug trial happens, well, then you've got a path and that's going
Right.
on. But if it doesn't, you know, at some point in the future, that will be the conditions will no longer be.
Right, well, I've asked myself, I mean, because like I said, that New Year's Eve time was a really emotionally explosion for me, and I felt really clean, and wondering if there's anything else my soul needs to do. It felt like I'm living in this triple thing, because if the UCD trial fails, then the USF will likely happen, and then if that fails, you know, unless some new miracle drug trial happens, I'll go into hospice. But I do hold that. I feel, especially with the two sons coming, that will kind of complete the feeling of doing what I need to do. And especially if the pain continues. Parvati said in class, you weren't there, but she talked about how that the pain process kind of wears you down to prepare you for saying, okay, now I'm really ready, because I don't need to be in this pain.
Right.
Mari's mentioned that her friend from Denmark is coming, and that's kind of related to our children too, because their son lived with us as an exchange student. He really was like a third son for us. And after he'd been home for maybe 18 months after he left us, he was killed in a train accident. And that's the biggest tragedy I've had in my life, I think. And
Yeah.
to see Moens, the father, is kind of like seeing Jacob, the son.
And
Closing
he's
the loop
visited
there.
like 4 times before from Denmark, come
Yeah.
just to see us, so
Yeah.
so I'm kind of living that in parallel all the time, realizing.
Right, it's like.
But, you know, that's why I said after the day after the class, you know, I got all fired up about that drug trial, saying, oh my God, here I go flipping again. So I don't know.
Maybe those conditions, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me.
It feels good to look in a more impersonal way, like we don't manifest the first conditions that bring us here, and maybe we don't manifest the ones that take us away.
Yeah. Some flowers blossom and some are just seeds. If you look at the back of my memorial service has that poem that talks about that's my hope of passing on the seeds that they blossom. Well, thank you for, you know, I was just so blown away that you wanted me back. I was like, oh my goodness. And it's been really great that he's been here too. I never thought in a million years he would ever do this, so really proud of him.
Time flies.
Yeah. Well, you know, that actually brings me back to something that you said earlier too, which was, you know, I don't really do anything special. I just bring her what she needs to eat. And that, while on one hand that's true, the other thing that I see is that really isn't true. I mean, you have engaged.
Yes.
You've engaged with her, and that's what matters. You know,
Absolutely.
and the soup matters, and the standing there waiting for her 5 minutes to figure out what her gut will tolerate matters. To all of it is an expression of your connection and how much you love her, and you know, being willing to be broken open and to engage. You know, I mean, it's the thing. I think it's what we're living for. I think it's the whole reason to be here. And I think it's what most of us fight for a really long time, and I think it's really striking. So, yeah, Devin, you had something?
For Ted, I don't really have a question, but I just want to say something. I think you should keep these videos that
you've been recording with us. 'Cause, you know, as you said, it was hard for you to come here and see you guys hug and kiss. I think that was just amazing to see.
How long did you?
And I think that you should just cherish this for the rest of your life and let people know.
How long do
what you
things
guys
stay on
talked about,
YouTube?
but-
Maybe you know.
Yeah.
How long do things stay on YouTube after they're posted? Is it forever?
Forever.
I think I am going to keep it
Until
forever.
it manifests.
Thank you.
We've got DVDs for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Thank you for
I'd
saying
save
that.
a hard copy somewhere.
Yeah, we've got hard copies. Davina.
So then you can post it on YouTube, and then your grandkids can see it, and then your great grandkids can see it.
Yeah, 'cause they'll understand YouTube.
No way.
That's right. This is my lineage right here, yeah.
Oh, remember, we're old enough to remember what 8 tracks were, so.
That's right, yeah.
That'll be around forever, sure.
Yeah, really. Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.